Radical.
Welcome to Flea Market Stories, documenting one man's journey into the world of flea marketing. You know, it's a small world. It's a small, small world. And it just so happens somebody stopped by my space at the flea market. And they were talking about a game store that I had been to before, a local game store. Many of you remember the story I talked about where I went into a game store and the owner got mad at me because he thought I was going into business for myself, even though his customer kept asking me questions, and I eventually, kind of started, going into business for myself. But only after his customer kind of harassed me and kept asking me questions. Well, that's a big no-no, right? So one of the biggest no-nos is to actually try to be selling your game stuff in a store where there's someone selling their game stuff. Now, how does that lead into the flea market? Well, just so happens that person's cousin came by the flea market. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, maybe he found out or something that I worked at the flea market and I was that game guy. Because I was thinking at this point he was still mad at me. But nah, he had been actually out of that store, out of that business for months. And probably, he had done forgotten about me and all that. Well, if he saw me again, he'd be like, son of a bitch. Now, his cousin basically talked about how he is with his wife and they're selling mostly like horror stuff and different types of things. And he got out of the game business. I didn't really kind of talk about it further. I kind of changed the subject because, I didn't want to go into details because, get back to him. That I have a game business and I'm the guy that he's mad at. But again, it probably wouldn't even matter. Well, he wasn't going to come by and be like, you son of a bitch! I don't know. He's not even really that close. It's about maybe 15, 20 miles away from the flea market. Completely different town. But now it's the part where I kind of get away from the flea market stories. I can technically do this. I'm going to shift from that flea market story. Did you like the story about how somebody came by and they said that they were the cousin of someone at a game store? That's as far as that story goes. I'm going to deviate and use that as a segue. Again, it's technically legal. I can use that as a segue to talk about this guy's game store. Now, did I mention things about this guy's game store that I didn't like before? He was not professional. His discs were not shine brilliantly. In fact, some of the discs look funky. Number one job of someone selling games is to make sure, the discs look good. All the cases, some of them still had GameStop stickers on them. Number two job of someone professionally that is selling games is to put them in different cases or to take the GameStop sticker stuff off. And number three, sometimes his organization was weird. I got a Call of Duty Ghost from him that had, not lie, it was an expensive price, but it had 2 install discs in it. I took it back and rectified, but that wouldn't happen in my media store. That would not happen at my media store. And I'm just a guy at the flea market. I'm not somebody that had an actual game store, a brick and mortar game store, but this guy had one. And it's not really that his prices were too high. His prices were kind of reasonable. His location was good. I started to think about why he went out of business. Why that guy went out of business and why I hope to not go out of business. Well, simply, he was not charging enough for the things that he was reselling. Number one problem. And maybe that's all he can charge or get out of things, but put simply, if you are going to be selling new items and you're not going to be charging near new prices for those items at your store, then it's not going to work out because you have to have a healthy profit. And if you stock a lot of items that are not selling, that are not moving, then guess what? That's not good. It means business is not going to be good. Now, the burden of having a traditional video game store is you're expected to carry a lot of that stuff. You're expected to carry Nintendo Switch. You're expected to carry PlayStation 5. You're expected to carry the latest games. That's the problem. Is it cost money to get these items, and you might be sitting on these items because it's the same exact items people can get at like a Walmart or something like that. It's the same exact items people can get at a GameStop. You have to differentiate yourself from these other places, meaning your prices have to be lower, your customer service has to be really great, or you have to have gimmicks. Like if I had a brick and mortar store, I would have so much room for, well, number one, activities. Remember Step Brothers? That's a funny movie. I would have a lot of room to do whatever I'd like to do. And I would literally build a arcade of type sorts in there. And I would have the same setup at the flea market I basically have, just on a grander scale. I would have a little room or an area of about 15 to 20 game consoles from all generations. And I would have flat screens. I could just even have tables, man. I could do what I do right now, but just have more room. And that way people could go over and they could, play games, whatever they want to play. And then that would work. That would help you sell the games. I mean, it's not rocket science here. Is this revolutionary what I've done to the flea market? Here I swing back to talk about the flea market. Is it revolutionary what I've done to the flea market? The concept of having systems running that can test games in real time and show people not only that they work, but tell them, hey, you could play some if you'd like to. Right? You can even set a little timer, I'm going to give you 30 minutes till the next person comes in. Am I not correct in this? If you set up a arcade in a store, a brick and mortar store, would there not be a lot of people that would just come to play games for downtime? Maybe they're nearby and they go oh, okay, well, I'm waiting on my lunch to get done somewhere else, or I'm waiting to meet somebody. I'm going to come in here and play some games. And maybe they don't buy a lot of games, but maybe they do. Maybe they find something they want to play and they're like, hey, how much for this system? How much for that game? A lot of retro gaming consoles and systems, they sell themselves because people like the way the controllers feel. They're like, damn, this is pretty cool. What is this, an N64? Yeah, I've heard this is a really cool console. Yeah. But I kept thinking about that. I kept thinking about how I went in there. Or rather, well, let's talk about the last call I had to him. I made a call, and he knew who it was. He recalled my voice, but I basically said, hey, it was an awkward call, right? I was trying to, I felt a little guilty because, like I said, I went into business for myself in the store, so I was asking about, his game consoles because I needed some to test games. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to need some game consoles to test games. How much is this console? How much is that console? He had a Dreamcast he was selling for $60, man. I knew something was wrong then. I was like, the hell is he selling a Dreamcast for only $60 for? And then he went into other things well, PS2, $50. And then I'm like, whoa, hold the phone here. 2024, because it was early January. No, maybe in late 2023. Anyways, a PS2 for $50? You don't even get that on Goodwill.com auctions. You don't, man. Maybe 10 years ago you did, but not anytime recently. And I should have kind of realized that he was selling off everything